So we've talked about some statistics on crashes, both bicycles and pedestrians, and what they are. And the question that we have to ask ourselves now is, well, why do they happen? And there's obviously many reasons for that. Lack of facilities is one that's argued quite frequently, and that's certainly what some of the programs are trying to address in terms of providing those facilities to accommodate bicycles and pedestrians. Another big one is violation of the rules. Right, so we do have some guidelines in place for how to walk, how to bike, and maybe that sounds kind of simple, but it's very important in terms of how we accommodate all those modes, and that those violations, especially the right-of-way violations, that tend to lead to some of the safety issues. But the one I really want to point out to you, and I'll address it several times as we go along here, is this issue of false sense of security. And one of the things that has come out of some of the infrastructure improvements that have been discussed, and I'll present to you here, to improve bicycle and pedestrian activity and pedestrian and bicycle safety and accommodations is this false sense of security and the feeling where bicycle and pedestrians, now that we've created this facility, no longer have to pay attention to their environment. And it's kind of created a counter safety related issue, if that makes sense. Sam, look familiar? UMass, right? Good old days. So one of the things that many communities have, and many states have, is, and this is just an example, this is from the University of Massachusetts campus, which I was on the faculty before I came to Wisconsin. Well, Massachusetts is a state that has a very strict law in terms of yield to pedestrians and crosswalks. And so what you see on campus here is that the students don't even look, they just walk, under the assumption that the vehicle is going to yield to them. And every year, unfortunately, there's some negative consequences that come along with it. So I always love this one. So in a community where you have 2 cemeteries and no hospitals, that's not something that you want to get involved in. There's a ton of things that we can talk about in terms of engineering, and you've probably all heard about the E's, right? So there's 3 E's, 4 E's. I've heard an argument that there's 7 E's, so depending upon who you listen to. But obviously, in our limited time, I want to focus only on the 1 E that's related to engineering or engineer. Okay, so I should have an ING there, engineering component to this presentation. Now, our challenge is the following. We have to introduce a system that now is accommodating of all these modes of travel. We have to design for all the modes in the future, and we have to find ways to incorporate those modes into our current system. One of the things that I won't talk a lot about today, but I'm actually spending a lot of time thinking about, is this whole concept of walking speed and how we accommodate the pedestrian under different types of signalized intersection crossing variables. How fast do you walk? Everybody know your walking speed? So that's kind of tongue-in-cheek, right? But the world thinks you all walk 4 feet per second. But the world's changing. Now they think you're going to walk 3.5 feet per second here in another couple of months. Okay, so you're all getting slower. Why is that? Well, because the population is getting older, right? So we think that's slowing it down a little bit. And for those of you who are in transportation, thought about some intersection design, signalization, et cetera, know that walking speed is how we time pedestrian crossing signals, right? Where we're going with some of the research I'm working on is, I think that's ridiculous. And I've spent many, many hours in national meetings on debates about how fast people should be walking and what that time should be. Where the world's dynamic. We're all dynamic. We all walk different ways, and we're finding new ways to dynamically accommodate that walking speed into our traffic signal system. So if you have questions about that, we can address those at the end. But I think walking speed becomes an important issue. Intersection control and some of the signalization that goes along with it. And then the bottom line is striking that balance and finding a way to accommodate that balance between all users. Now, as we design for bikes, how wide is a bike? How wide is a bike user? So there's some design guidelines that exist, and we believe a bicycle needs about 1 meter of space. And if you notice bike line, for roadways that have bike lanes designed into them, they're approximately 3 feet, and that's the design standard that's used. So we've come up with that through this design of bikes, but we also have to think about the bike users and the bicyclists themselves and who they are. We have multiple issues to deal with in terms of those who are professional bikers or bike many, many miles to our children in the Safe Route to School concept. So we have to accommodate all those and all these other different route type selections that go along with it. So speeds, mix, parking, distance, intersections, all those types of things, all right? How many of you have seen this document? So this is the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, AASHTO, has produced a couple of, I think, pretty good documents related to Guide for Development of Bicycle Facilities. There's also one for pedestrian facilities. And it provides a lot of overview of what I'm going to talk to you about yet here this morning. But it provides a good resource if you are interested in this or you want to dig a little bit deeper at a later date of some of the things related to the designs of these concepts. So I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes showing you different ideas and things that I've come across in accommodating bicycle and pedestrian related issues in the system, and then we'll talk about some of the signalization stuff as well. So we've all seen bike lanes, right? And bike lanes are one of the methodologies now that, you know, provides a clear and separate space for bicycle usage. One of the challenges is within the existing system is making sure you have the roadway width to accommodate that. So in many cases, people would like to introduce bike lanes, but the roadway doesn't have sufficient width to accommodate both the vehicles and the bikes. What some communities then have decided to do, especially on higher classification type roadways, is then to provide a physical separation. So if you can't fit it within an existing system, then they add on to the system, again, if space is available, to accommodate those other modes. And looking at it from the other direction, you know, a physical barrier then provides the space you need to look at vehicle travel versus bicycle travel and separating those modes from a safety standpoint. What becomes an interesting challenge, and especially from the traffic control device world, is then when these bicycle facilities cross the vehicular facilities, then, you know, another mechanism of traffic control needs to come into play to accommodate that. So there's a subset, if you will, of traffic control devices for accommodating these types of facilities as they go across our roadway systems. And then there's other methodologies. So here's an example of where the bike lane exists, and it's accommodated into a bridge structure, but there's also then a pedestrian facility that exists on the side. So if you're thinking forward and accommodating these modes, and this obviously is a relatively new bridge, that there are good ways to bring both of those modes, or all three of those modes, if you will, together in a effective design. Anybody recognize that street? So that's University Avenue in Madison, right? This street still continues to get national attention, rightly or wrongly, for an effective accommodation of all modes of travel. The primary reason for that is this: if you're familiar with this road, you know that this bike lane over here that's separated by the small median is flowing in the opposite direction. So we've accommodated, even though this was changed to a one-way street, we accommodate both directions of bicycle travel and have developed a whole signalized intersection system for the bikes alone in that opposite direction. So not only have we added down the mode of transit, but now we have bicycles, we have pedestrians and vehicles all sharing the same cross-section, the same space. And as I mentioned, this continues to be a national model of how to accommodate all those modes of travel.